All right, Justin Geifer, welcome back to Grimerica. How you doing?
Doing great. Am I classified as a Grimerican now because of my
Yeah,
third
dude.
time here?
Is it your third time?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we were looking for you and you went MIA for a while, and because we were doing these videos on Rockfin for a while, and we are like, we got to get Justin back to do like a presentation of the latest stuff he's doing. I mean, I really like what you're doing because to me, it's like it's the people like you that are taking scientific research and putting it out there and comparing it to the paradigm that the scientists aren't really doing, right? Like you're looking at these latest studies and you're like, look, they're showing this and that. And the scientific world hasn't caught up yet to where the research is.
Yeah, 100%. And I feel like I think just people won't, when I was teaching English a long time ago, it's like, do you want your students to do their homework, and they won't do it. There's a resistance to it. It's the same thing. So I think what I'm trying to do is making it as palatable as possible and showing like the most memorable and important bits from everything that I'm reading. So I think it's great, especially in the comments, to get some chatter going about this subject matter, because if we have a whole generation of people that don't talk about this, I mean, it's going to be hard to make up that deficit in the following years after. So it's got to be almost part of the culture in a sense, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah, and they don't really want a lot of it to be they. It seems like selective on what they want to talk about. I mean, I know one of these guys. I don't know if you know his name, Sturla. I think he's Norwegian, or he's a Viking. He talks about Viking DNA a lot. He's a scientist, and they didn't want him to. I think he had problems getting his doctorate, or they didn't want him to discuss his research. So he started getting canceled. He's like, "What's going on? I'm just talking about like Viking DNA and where the science is leading me." So that's the other part. Is some of it seems very selective. It seems like they have to sort of it has to go through this really fine filter before it's allowed out to the
There's
public.
something very strange going on with that type of stuff where there's selective funding and certain narratives, some narratives that you would think are just innocuous on their own, right? Such as what you're describing, this Viking DNA thing. This guy's just finding out information and sharing it. And for some reason or another, there's some interests out there that don't want that out there.
Yeah,
They want to prevent that for whatever reason. And that's just that sets us back so many decades. Like, I think one thing that if people who are just getting into American archaeology specifically, if they understood the Gilded Age, which is about like the 1880s, 1890s, that was like the golden age of archaeology, where they were discovering all these mounds in North America. They had detailed descriptions. Serpent Mound being one of the more prominent ones that has resurfaced again with Graham Hancock's work, his most recent book, America Before. He talks about all of this stuff. And basically, what he's covering is what he's picking up where they left off back almost 120 years ago now. And if people were aware of that, they could see how low quality it really is out there right now in terms of the speed at which new discoveries are being processed. And if you have a great idea, you better have 1,000 peer-reviewed people agree with you before it can even be considered. You know what I mean? It's just so ridiculous that I think now, with the rise of the internet, that's kind of being exposed for what it is in terms
yeah,
of like how common people like view academia now.
yeah. I'm reading a book right now called Prehistoric World, or the Vanished Races, and they have a chapter on. So this was written back in the time frame that you're talking about, and it's a very scientific work. I mean, they reference it all. They get all kinds of scientific opinions on it. And the chapter on the mound builders is like 100 pages. It's huge. They go right into detail of all the mounds that are found all over America. It's pretty interesting. It's not even that controversial, but like you said, it's the details that they talk about all this stuff in. And now it's just was the word you used? It's like
It's like selective like filtering or
yeah,
whatever.
there's a yeah, it's just that there's a roughness or a something to what they're doing nowadays. What's the main interest in your research and in your channel? Is it like archaeology, DNA research, migrations, all that kind of stuff? Like how would you summarize it?
The broadest description of I guess my overall goal of the channel beyond the educational side is really getting to the bottom of what this existence is, like specifically the not just evolution, but the history according to the fossil record and all of these other dating techniques, the actual story of humanity. That is the broadest description. Now you can zoom in on different parts of that timeline, and that's kind of where I come in. Is this I'm kind because I've always read, like when I was in college, I had access to JSTOR and like all of these different archives, and I would read them anyway. So what I'm doing is kind of taking from the conveyor belt of what's coming out and showing it to people and saying, oh, here's something interesting, except I'm doing it under the umbrella of human history, essentially. And I'll go on these arcs. So I think the last time I was here, we talked about Doggerland at length. We talked about the conquistadors. We talked about the Cerruti Mastodon site in San Diego, I think,
Yeah.
Among other things. Oh, the Scythians and the horseback people. And I think we talked a little bit about Indo-European language families. So all of that stuff are kind of subjects that I cover that you'll see in my channel, where I'll basically pick out the latest and greatest of each subject and kind of go over it. Not so much with a fine-tooth comb, but more with a general, not just a summary, but also the key points to in a more palatable way for people to sort of check in. Because if you get too dense with this material, I found after about 4 years of doing this, people kind of check out after if you get too dense. So
is there a discipline that does what you're doing? Like, is there a scientific discipline, or are you combining like a whole bunch of different things?
Oh, I'm pretty sure what I'm doing is not new. There's a lot of guys who do aggregate work like this where they report on studies. But what I'm more interested in are independent researchers, such as Bruce Fenton is great. His stuff is in terms of this subject matter is really the cutting edge, and he's been plagiarized as well. And so when you're plagiarized, you're in the when you're demonized and plagiarized, you're on the right track. But as far as what your original question was, no, I don't think what I'm doing is new at all.
So what's like one of the sort of recent things, or some of the main things that have of new knowledge that sort of changed the way we should look at things lately? Is there anything like that pops out?
Oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead. No.
No. Yeah. The number one thing that I think is should be addressed is the greater and more recent out of Africa theory. People have heard the out of Africa theory. Like if you mention it, I'm pretty sure most people who have some level of education, that will ring a bell. But most people don't really understand the numbers involved and what the actual landscape is genetically, including the geography and the what was accessible at the time and how gene flow works. So I guess how I want to kick things off is to just give a basic gestalt of what the greater out of Africa theory is, unless you guys have something to add.
No, I think that's a good way to go about it, and that's kind of Bruce Fenton's work, right?
Well, Bruce Fenton has this isn't the only thing he does. He has the into Australia theory, the into America theory. He has this whole own perspective that he's developed through his own research and his own writings, how the human story played out. But yeah, his work is definitely part of it, but there's a ton of other work too.
Okay.
Yeah, so for people at home, I would suggest back in the 80s was when this stuff really started kicking off. So if you want to know the origins of the greater out of Africa theory, check out Wolpoff and Thorne's work of the 80s. If you type that in, it'll come out. In 1983, Johnson et al. Published a very famous paper that suggested both the out of Africa theory and the out of East Asia theory. He presented them both. And in that paper, he suggested that the East Asia theory was actually more plausible based on just his own research. And that was 40 plus years ago that this came out. 1983, 40 years ago. Since then, there's been more recent stuff like Alan Templeton's work is revealing A lot of stuff out of China too. Shi Huang's work, and of course Bruce Fenton's work that I just mentioned. So check those out if you guys are want to know more about this specific instance.
So isn't Bruce's work into Africa?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. That's what his book was. We had him on for a book called Into Africa, I'm certain.
Yeah, into Africa, out of us. He has a few of them out of Australia and into America.
Okay, so when you say out of Africa, you mean the opposite of that in a way, right?
I'm talking about the out of Africa theory. The greater out of Africa theory I'm talking about is the mainstream establishment view. I'm about to lay that out, and then we're gonna because I think a lot of people don't understand what that is, and then we're gonna poke holes in it because it should be a view that should be tossed out anyway.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of what I meant.
Yeah. So here's the mainstream root of the human story, essentially, the greater out of Africa theory. So 6 to 7 million years ago, we have the first hominins rise up. So the word hominin, when I say that, I mean modern humans, archaic humans, and Australopithecines. So that's not to be confused with hominid, which includes chimps and gorillas. So I'm talking about just actual people, essentially, 6 to 7 million years ago. And then 2 million years ago, Homo erectus starts to leave Africa. Now, Homo erectus, you can think of as, well, they are compatible with us, no doubt about it. They probably would have seen us as regular humans, but they really had the technology to spread out as far as they did. And if you can see the map here, this is fairly conservative dates. But you can see this yellow line here. This is all Homo erectus. This is their purported migration route. And you can see it covers, for people listening who can't see this, it covers Africa, Europe, Middle East, and East Asia. This is, and a little bit of Southeast Asia, the Javanese archipelago there. So Homo erectus, this is a big date because a lot of people have speculated, including John Anthony West, the late John Anthony West, that there is probably, if not equal to a more, I guess, a civilization that had their shit together because of just how widespread they were. 700 or 2 million years later, we're talking about them. Do you know what I'm saying? They still exist on this earth if we know where to look. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
Homo erectus, I can't overstate like how important it is to understand what Homo erectus is, what we think it is anyway. So meanwhile, so this group leaves. They evolve into Neanderthals and Denisovans, these Homo erectus, and then the group that stays in Africa becomes Homo sapiens. Okay, this happens around 700,000 years ago. So from 2 million to 700,000 years ago, Homo erectus is running everything essentially. And then 700,000 years ago, we have, quote, modern humans. Are you guys with me so far? I hope this makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the greater out of Africa theory in a nutshell. Now, the more recent out of Africa theory is the one that we'll be spending the rest of our time talking about, because this is the one where it gets really political and so, like, you know, everyone has an opinion and people get very passionate about the fact that everything had to have come out of Africa, and which is, from a scientific point of view, is pretty irrational considering the evidence that we have for that view, which isn't substantial at all. So the recent out of Africa, in a nutshell, is there's 3 waves that come out of Africa. One around 300,000 years ago, and then which is unsuccessful, and then 120,000 years ago, which is also unsuccessful. And then the Lake Toba eruption happens, and then there's another migration right after that, and that one is the big one that is successful, that ends up becoming modern, basically who we are now.
Right.
According to that genetic bottleneck theory. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that was Toba. When did you say it was? 70?
Toba was about 72,000 years ago, around there.
Something's happening with your mic. I don't know if it's scratching on something or
Oh no! Oh, it might be it might be my hood. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No problem.
It's better now.
All right.
Was it your channel that I just saw something about a 3 million-year-old tool that they found?
It's a 1.2. Yeah, it was my channel. There was a 1.2 million year old tool that was used to mine obsidian in
That's what it
Ethiopia.
was. Right.
Yeah, and just what a mind blow that is. Obsidian wasn't thought to have. We haven't been. It's commonly thought that obsidian was very recent, like 6,000, 8,000 years ago, maybe 10,000 years. You know, so this pushes it back over 1 million years. Obsidian manufacturing, and it wasn't just one that they found. They found
Like
a rich
plant.
node. Yeah, it was like a manufacturing plant essentially. They found a ton of. They found like 200 of these obsidian arrowheads, which is very interesting because they all look the same. You know what I mean? There was no variation. It wasn't like a bunch of guys just made them at home. They had a rhyme and reason to them. They had a distinct technique that they were using.
And this is going back, and this is sort of admitted that it's 1.2 million, right? So
yeah.
That's pushing another timeline further back, isn't it?
That's pushing back. Well, like what I just mentioned before, obsidian. But it's not pushing back dates of like Homo erectus or anything because they think it belongs to Homo erectus and that is within the timeline. But the obsidian manufacturing is that that itself is huge because if they're doing that, what else are they doing?
Yeah, it's pushing back our view of the technological aspect of it, I guess.
Yeah, it's basically lends more credence that they're more than just shambling entities. You know, they actually probably had some sort of, you know, like they had some sort of sophistication to them, some level of sophistication, because obsidian is dangerous. I mean, I don't know if you guys have ever held obsidian, but it's sharp and it fractures easily. So you have to be very meticulous when you're making it. So that's no joke. Anyway, so this recent out of Africa theory has spawned a bunch of different sub theories, right? So one of them I mentioned earlier, out of East Asia. There's out of India. There's out of Papua New Guinea, which is technically part of Australia. Once upon a time, it was connected to Australia, but it's not really out of Australia. So I mean, and then there's the actual out of Australia. You know, so it gets there's a bunch of different viewpoints, right? But what it boils down to, and this is what I want to tell the audience directly, is what is it feasible to you? This is just all you have to know if you're just a normal person who is new to this. Is it feasible to you that humans stayed in Africa for those millions of years? Or is it more plausible that people were always moving around, kind of like water molecules in a vessel? And if there is space, they're going to occupy it. If it's accessible, they're going to go there. Or is it plausible that they just all stayed in Africa for no real reason? Because there's no barriers for them staying in there, except certain cataclysmic events like Mount Toba.
Yeah.
So one of these sub theories is a multi-regional theory, which is what we were talking about earlier. Some of Fenton's work and other people's work. And this takes place around the same time period, 50,000 to 120,000 years ago. So this addresses a later modern human story rather than the initial archaic flow of humans like Homo erectus. So if you look at the visual, you can see, if you look at South America on the bottom right, you can already see that there's some, what do you call, the numbers here are run contrary to North America, to the path, right? Because you don't see 30,000-year-old stuff in North America according to what we're looking at, right?
Right.
So why is this stuff down here older than the stuff up here when they had to go through up here to get down here?
Yeah. Well, so and could they go through there when it was covered with ice? I mean, for probably 40, 50,000 years, wasn't it covered?
It was covered for a long time, yeah. So there's probably no way that they were going through the ice sheet before the corridor. So, but they found these people. There's these people that live in South America, and I'm not talking about Clovis, like the Amerindian people. I'm talking about people before them. That 30,000 years is pretty conservative. Now I think this map is from like 2017. Now they've pushed it back about 50,000 years ago, that they found traces of this group called the Lagoa Santo people. And these people are one of two tribes that have the Melanesian DNA marker, which is from Papua New Guinea, Australia. So why do they have that? And all the other Indians don't, you know? So that's just one example. There's actually a lot of overlap between South America and Australia. Let me just show you this image here.
Sure,
you guys,
keep going.
You guys have looked at the Milky Way galaxy. You guys have looked at, like, gone camping.
Yeah.
So this is the dark rift of the Milky Way. Now, the indigenous people in South America and Australia and Sahel, which is a megacontinent, they had their origin story. When they look at the dark rift, they see an emu, like a flightless bird, like this. They have the same. There's a cultural overlap in the people in South America as well. They have this same cultural narrative where they look at the dark rift of the Milky Way and they see this flightless bird. There are no other cultures that have that overlap except those two. And the overlap and the other common denominator is, well, these people share genetics as well. Yeah. So that is I don't think that's up to chance, because in order for that culture to carry across, there must have been a steady stream of people going, not just men either, like families had to have gone and like colonized the area and lived there for a while. You know, if people were just passing through, why would that aspect of their culture even be there? You see what I'm saying? But this insight that I'm saying, you wouldn't really know to ask that unless you really looked into and looked between the lines of a lot of these research papers, because there's no one who's gonna stick their reputation on what I just said about the cultural overlap. It's just a mere observation, though.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But I mean, that's a huge observation, right? That I mean, what do you guys think of that story?
Well, here's another observation. Can I share my screen for a sec quickly?
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to, and then you can go back to yours.
Yeah.
I noticed this the other day, and somebody had a different view in one of our chats, but you see this New Zealand and Australia there. Can you see? Yeah. Can you see this, Darren? Look at this. Look at on this elevation map here, how this was all like, I mean, at some point, it looks like this was all a platform and would have been all connected at some level. I mean, look at how, you know, you talk about the water levels being so different back then. I mean, look at how this almost, New Zealand would have almost been this huge area that connected all the way through.
Yeah. So at the last glacial, and you're absolutely right, the last glacial maximum, you see where Papua New Guinea is, it was connected. That definitely was connected to Australia. And I'll show you a map. I have a visual.
Yeah, there's a new one that has it more pronounced, but I mean, look at that. Yeah. And then look at how close, like, look at all that stuff that's, you know, all the way over to South America. So, I mean, maybe there was a string of these things you could just island hop all the way across.
Oh, that's definitely no doubt about it. Even Hawaii too. If you go to the corner of Hawaii, I mean, they all have, if you look at their language even, and the type of stuff that they were eating, like sweet potato, like, they had a triangle. Yeah. Yeah. They definitely had a triangle of communication and I guess trade routes going between the Polynesia, Hawaii, and Tahiti, and probably Rapa Nui as well, Easter Island.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even this whole Australia, this whole thing, I mean, it might have been all connected more. I mean, easily, at least you could maybe visually see it to hop in a boat and go there.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I think if people were made aware of that, then it would be a lot easier for them to digest the information and really connect dots and really get somewhere with their understanding, instead of just waiting for some academic to tell them, you know.
So are these new maps playing a role in this too? Like, I know Randall Carlson uses a whole bunch of new terrain maps, and like you're able to see these effects of the flood, you know, that you've never been able to really see easily before. You can just
yeah, like drone footage and LiDAR footage and stuff like that.
Or just even these Google maps, like in the different
the
US Geological Survey map, I think is really powerful as well to show you different sort of views of the landscape.
Yeah. And the cool thing about Randall is a lot of like those images, he gets it on his own too, you know?
Yeah.
So like he's, you know, he's next level for sure. But yeah, if you guys want to see more of these maps, you can go to what's it called? atlasofthehumanjourney.com. A lot of their dates are conservative, but it's still good for the reasons Graham was talking about, which is for just a general understanding and a good visual of just where the genetics were at the time and the accessible places and what was inaccessible and the climate data, which is the main difference between now and 1980 when this started kicking off. Is we just have way more data. Like we're able to like we mapped the human genome. We have climate data now. You know, we have LiDAR. We have all these new. Just within the past 3 years, we've discovered so many traces of older humans. I mean, there are. I think they found teeth in China that are about 130, 140,000 years old. I mean, that itself throws a monkey wrench in recent out of Africa. But anyway, let me just go back to this map here. Another site, if you look at South America, that they're missing is this site in Ecuador. It's this megalithic site, and it doesn't fit well with the surrounding known cultures. And lo and behold, they found that it does belong to a Lagoa Santo. They have a Lagoa Santo connection, and it makes sense because the Lagoa Santo are part of. They're basically make their home in the Amazon, the densest part of the Amazon, and Ecuador has that western part of the Amazon there. So that's exactly where this megalithic site was, and it's the only site in South America that uses mortar, which is very interesting. So they think that this site is probably between 30 to 50,000 years old. And again, it along with Monte Verde and Pedra Ferrada and all these other sites, it just seems like there were people there well before than we're letting on. So and that DNA signal of the Australasians in South America is just, I don't understand why that's not a bigger deal, because that is probably the smoking gun, right? Out of all the smoking guns, that just seems that's genetic data right there.
That's
Unless
the one Graham wrote about in his book.
Yeah, Graham addressed it in his book. Several people have talked about it. I forgot the name of the guy who discovered it in the other village, the Cedary people, starts with an S, I think. But yeah, anyway, but he did work as well. So anyway, so a lot of people have thought, well, since they had watercraft, these people in Australia, in order to even get to Australia, it was there. It's a big deal to get to Australia because there's this natural barrier called the Wallace Line that let me pull up the slide here. All right, so there's these two lines, right? And you can see these are this is a Java archipelago here. These lines will drain you, they'll push you into the Indian Ocean. So it made it impossible for many, many years for any large megafauna to anything above 100 pounds essentially to go through these lines. So there are people here 1 million years ago already. So how did they cross this line? It's a conundrum. No one really knows for sure.
Why is it so hard? Because it's so
it's because the currents are so strong, and also no one really knows for sure why. They just know that it exists, but I suspect that it has something to do with it being shallow water, and the Indian Ocean is really deep water. So I think it's just flowing, because all all used to be land 18,000 years ago. So these waters are not that deep. It's kind of like the North Sea. The North Sea is not that deep. It's just really cold. So anyway, my point,
it's going off that shelf into the Indian Ocean.
Into the Indian Ocean, yeah. And then once they're out here, they're boned. You know, they can't get back. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But
so do they have to go north then to Davao and then along the top part?
I don't think that they were able to go that far because they didn't have they had watercraft, but I don't think they were able to cross a sea. I think they had to island hop with like literally bamboo and vines, essentially, which Thor Heyerdahl made that trip. So he if you guys remember that trip in 1947, Thor Heyerdahl on the rep. Yeah, so he proved that it could be done. So I think that's what these people were doing. But honestly, we don't really have to explain how because we know that they were there, you know? So I guess what I'm trying to get at is the assumption could be, well, they probably island hopped their way to Easter Island and then made it to Tierra del Fuego, the bottom tip of South America somehow. Because otherwise, because they couldn't get through the Beringia because of the giant glacier.
Yeah.
So what the theories are limited. There is also there was a theory about like floating ice that they were kind of able to hop between like these large chunks of ice down south. I haven't read too much about that. Like there's not too much out there on that, but they got there somehow, and they did have watercraft back then, which according to the mainstream was supposed to have only been invented like 4,000 years ago.
Well, I mean, well, what about through like the mid-Atlantic where Atlantis was supposed to be? I mean, you know, couldn't you island hop through Atlantis in the mid-Atlantic as well?
Well, I think at the last glacial maximum, all that stuff was most of the British Isles and most of Western Europe was under ice or near uninhabitable, near that, like the northern parts. But Bruce does have a theory, the Solutrean theory. Like part of the Solutrean theory is they found those these arrowheads that are traditionally from Europe about 25,000 years ago, and they found them in North America. So what are European tools doing in North America about 25,000 years ago? So, I mean, there's that theory as well. But those people wouldn't have the Melanesian marker. You know, those people weren't from Australasia, you wouldn't think. So how did these people down here get that? You know, so I think when we're talking about the Solutrean hypothesis, I think we're talking about a different group of people.
Right.
I don't know. Darren, what do you think? You've been quiet for a while, and I know you seem skeptical about all this stuff, which you should be. The out of Africa model is kind of sketch.
Well, I don't know if I'm skeptical. I just I don't know enough about the current model that far back to really comment, you know, like all of my knowledge sort of stops at the younger Dryas.
Okay, so I think we should just talk about the split then, because in the 700,000 year ago split, which is basically let me pull up this graphic here,
which kind of fits with Bruce and his wife's work on that whole theory about
the aliens.
Yeah, because we have a sudden outburst of these large brain hominins around 700,000 years ago. So like that date, especially in Bruce and his wife's case,
that's when they ate the mushrooms.
That might have been. They might have eaten the mushrooms and discovered fire and cooked meat and got their brains big, right? Is that one of those theories is still around. But anyway, so what we're looking at here is basically the common ancestor of modern humans, Homo denisova and Neanderthals, which we interbred with these people, no doubt about it. Another thing that I think people should remember is any species within the genus Homo, they were sexually they saw each other as the same thing, and they were sexually viable. So there were no mules that were born or anything like that. These were actual. They were all one people essentially. So
it's this like interracial is like ancient interracial.
Yeah, that's what was going on, and probably more races than these three too. There's probably a lot of other hominin that we don't even know about.
I thought they had 9. I thought they'd come up with 9 now. Like, where do the hobbits fit into this? Like,
and the races aren't like distinguishable by skeleton. I don't think. Can we tell someone's black or white by their skeleton?
Yeah, so yeah, the cranial, cranial morphology, the Hobbit people, they think that they didn't branch off from Homo erectus. They think that they branched off way earlier from Australopithecine, because of their body structure. They're very tiny, and so that would make more sense, because Australopithecine probably millions of years before erectus went out there, they probably proliferated and got to Java because of Homo luzonensis, which is about 990,000 years ago, and the Hobbit people that you just mentioned. So
the giants.
I don't know much about the giants. I'm sorry. I wish I did.
I mean, I hate to be the one to say it, but did we really evolve from this common ancestor? Or was there some sort of, are you about to get into like what happened 700,000 years ago? Like, does it really show us that modern human comes from this common ancestor, like really through all these different things? Or
well, I could tell you that. So see that orange dot, Cima de los Huesos?
Yeah.
That is the site of the oldest. Now listen carefully. The oldest extracted DNA from a hominin. The oldest, not the oldest African DNA, not the oldest Neanderthal DNA, the oldest. Well, this is that they think it is a Neanderthal, but so which is about 40,000 years old. So we have only genetic data from this thing. So we don't know exactly much about the archaic humans. This just tells us who our common ancestor was. So at some point we did have a common ancestor. There did live some sort of being that presumably had a smaller head than like smaller brain capacity than us and all that. But really, like you said, we don't really know. We just have like essentially what we have amounts to tree rings, essentially. If you're familiar with tree rings,
didn't they just prove that to be bullshit?
Really? Did they?
Just read
one of our guests.
It's not just that it's bullshit. It's that just like, you know, some trees do it every season or something, so they have 2 or 3 rings of things. So if it's up, you know, there's just turned out to be a bunch of variables, which is kind of, sometimes I have a hard time, but sometimes I think a million years is a long time, and maybe we have been fumbling around, but sometimes I think it's just a lot more compressed than that, and I don't really have any faith in like the dating system anymore of it or anything like that, so that makes it tough.
Yeah, it is tough. And that's the other common misconception about out of Africa theory is the DNA. How old, let me just ask you guys, how old do you think the DNA is that they're basing the out of Africa theory on, that everything came out of Africa? How old do you think that genetic sample is?
20,000 years?
No, it's the sample that they used was 5,000 years old, and since then they've only found a 12,000 year old DNA extraction, which is from northern Africa in Morocco. So that's not even sub-equatorial Africa. So that can't really tell us much about the origin story of humans, right? So that right there is probably the main sticking point most critics of the out of Africa theory have, is they're basing everything on this fairly young DNA extraction.
So the 700,000 years is the common ancestor. That's the thing there. 700,000 years.
Modern humans and Neanderthals. Yeah, that's a broad range. 750 to 550,000 is a broad range, of course. Like what Darren was alluding to, that some of the dating is really, they're ballparking a lot. And that reminds me, I should have started with this. A lot of this subject matter that we're talking about is a lot of guesswork, because we're just trying to connect dots. We see dots on the map, right, in the form of these archaeological discoveries, right, like teeth or whatever they're finding in China, and we're literally just trying to form a narrative. Now we have kind of a higher resolution because we have climate data and LiDAR and like subterranean or like ground penetrating radar and stuff like that. But really, it's still what anyone's guess, really. So yeah, that's why you have broad dates like this, 750,000 to 550,000. But one thing's for sure is something happened back then, for sure. Because you have from 700,000 years onward up until the end of the Pleistocene, essentially, you had free flowing gene flow between Africa, East Asia, and Australia, essentially. So you had, so what does that mean? That means more or less the Earth was habitable enough to have that type of stability where you have
Everyone
genetic.
was fucking. Is that what that means? Everyone was fucking everyone.
Yeah.
All over the place.
Every
Yeah.
corner of the.
And then you have Mount Lake Toba, right, erupts, and then that's what in the genetic data you see about 71,000 years ago. You see the split between Africans and Australasians, because
People kind of got split and stuck in their areas of the planet.
yeah, exactly. And let me just explain Mount Toba to everybody.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
this is a pretty famous graphic, and this is compared to like Mount St. Helens, right? 1980, Vesuvius, right? These just look like little duds compared to the Toba supervolcano, which is a once every 2 million year volcanic eruption.
Wow.
So yeah, so this giant cloud of debris, it didn't just block out the sun. I mean, there's acid rain, crop failure, and let me pull up
How come they don't have like Santorini on there, like the Thera one? I wonder.
it's on there. I think it's on there. And it's tiny though. So let's just take this map just for the so you see where do you see me circling this area?
Yep, near the
Okay.
Taboan Cave in the Philippines. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is where Mount Toba was, and this giant cloud of smoke goes northwest to Europe and the northern Caucasus around here, and this area is completely uninhabitable. There must have been a massive die-off of people here, probably Neanderthals, because there have been a lot of Neanderthals found in this area. And so what happened was that left only Asia, Australia, and sub-equatorial Africa as habitable. So you had a lot of people pouring into Africa, and this is where the into Africa theory comes from. And these people, they belong to the haplogroup L3, and this is a big point of contention as well, because the mainstream view L3 rose in Africa, and the into Africa people believe L3 formed in Yemen, which is present day Yemen, which is right across the Red Sea. And here's a better view. So this is the Bab el Mandeb Strait. So they believe after Toba erupted, a massive amount of people crossed this strait here back into Ethiopia, into Africa. And what's more is they found out that these people had weapons. They had ranged weapons. So, which is interesting detail. So the Africans that were living here, they couldn't keep them out if they wanted to, right? Because behind them, they're running away from the essentially nuclear fallout. And then you have the same thing. They go to East Asia as well. They kind of spread apart. But basically anything in the Northern Hemisphere gets cooked or frozen, however you want to. It's basically a wasteland, which is where I guess there are a lot of theories about some of the survivors of that. Some people think that's where white people came from, they were relegated to the fringes, and because of the pigment of their skin, they didn't live close to the equator, so their skin was a different color. Anyway, that's a whole nother rabbit hole.
What is a haplogroup again? Can you explain what that means to people?
So haplogroup basically is a classification of your mtDNA. Well, there's Y chromosome, which is from your from the male line, and then there's your the double X chromosome from your mom. And the female, the L3 in this case is an mtDNA, it's mitochondrial, so it belongs to the mom. So there's a whole classification from L0, which is a few 100,000 years ago, to about 700,000 years ago. You start to see some variation. And then when Lake Toba erupts, you start to see L3, M, and N, and all they're referring to is just how it looks under a microscope, these genetic markers, and then they're just assigned. So anyone belonging to haplogroup L3, you would know when you're looking at it, because that's what L3 looks like. They all have a certain distinct look. So haplogroup N or O has a variation.
But what does that what does that mean though? What is that? What is the difference between the looks? Is it a time thing, or is it a genetic makeup type thing?
It's a phenotypical thing, so it literally looks different under the microscope, and they classify them under just
what
by.
What does that equate to?
That just like, it's just their way of saying this is a group of genetically similar people that lived in this geographical area at this time.
Yeah.
And so for example, this is why the out of Africa theory is so incredulous. Like it can't, because it assumes that people are like redwood trees, that people stayed in one spot.
Right.
So like if a group of redwood trees, right, started in one spot and then we came back 2 million years later, we could deduce, okay, those trees that made its way like a few 100 miles down that way. So, but it won't go out of Africa. It'll stay in Africa. But humans are different. Especially modern humans who are just like us, they think like us. They're gonna go places. That's what they do. I think I forgot who it was, but there was a famous saying in philosophy: "If you must, you can." So I believe that is apt in this case, because humans, especially modern humans, they have not just ingenuity, but there's a batch of them that are inquisitive in every population. You know, there's a bold, there's a few. If there's mountains that are unexplored, there's going to be a group that's going to explore them. That's just how it is. And I just find it very hard to believe that people would stay in Africa for 6-7 million years before they leave.
And I just think they were smart. I just think they were way smarter than we give them credit for all the way through. I mean,
100%.
I just think that we get stuck in this paradigm of we are civilized and even the savages aren't civilized. And, you know, I'm reading this book and they talk about how, oh yeah, you know, you go from savage to barbarism, and then you're like midway barbarism. They have all these categories for people just based on whether they've gone through the Enlightenment or not. I mean, it's disgusting, right? I mean, so I feel like this is a problem going all the way back. Like maybe they were just smart and traveling all over in their boats and, you know, making tools and weapons and whatever. And I mean, I don't know. Seems to be that way now.
Yeah. Well, I brought up John Anthony West earlier. He believed that the pyramids and the Sphinx didn't go back to 12,000 years ago. He believed it went back a cycle before that, like 36,000 years ago. So John Anthony West is very well respected in his field. And I think he has, if he's correct, then I think what you just said has a lot more credence in the fact that these people were capable of so many things that we would be hard pressed to replicate now.
Like, what is it? What is the main evidence that the mainstream scientific community has that we're so much smarter than the past? Brain size or something like that? I mean, is that really equate to ingenuity and smartness? Is that what it is? Like the size of our noggins?
I think there's a lot of that. There's our technology. There's a bias, obviously, because we're living in the present. The mainstream views ourselves as the pinnacle of civilization, whereas if you take a longer view of history, there are a lot of people out there who would disagree with that, and they think that we're at a lower point of civilization.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and just because we have metal and like plastic and I guess satellite, if you believe that we have, I don't know, there's people who dispute that now, but just because we have that, it doesn't mean anything, because the bottom line is it going to help us survive into the future? What we have now, and a lot of people are probably, especially now, are probably have a negative view about where we're going. But it's like what Graham said in his books. These back then, people probably, their civilization probably wasn't oriented in the way our civilization is, like we are with consumerism and materialism and stuff like that. They were probably looking at life more holistically and more as like a process, and probably like a school, like an opportunity to live in harmony with nature and learn and as much and grow as much as an individual as possible. That's what it seems like if you look at what they held important to them, like just from their burial sites and what they were buried with, and some of the cave paintings like in France that are like 38,000, 40,000 years old. I mean, a lot of the themes are not beyond just subsistence living and hunting and stuff like that. It seems to be living in harmony, and that seems like a pretty advanced view in my book of the abstract, because remember, these people were supposed to be just mindless hunter-gatherers, just like surviving day to day, when really when you look at these, like something like the Sphinx, that seems to imply a lot of free time, like those types of projects. So like it doesn't seem like they're coming from a society that's struggling. It seems like
exactly.
they got rid of the obstacle of struggle and was able to focus on like the stars and aligning with the universe and really finding out what this life is. You know, that seems to be a more healthy view, I believe, especially now in light of a lot of the evidence now.
Yeah.
So
where's Egypt in relation to that? Yemen. I don't know where the fuck Yemen is.
It's pretty
Okay.
close.
Yemen is Yemen by Turkey?
No,
no,
Yemen
it's south.
below Saudi Arabia, isn't it? Kind of, or
Yeah, so this is Yemen right here, right? Do you see right here? This little tip. So Egypt is up here. So it's on the northeastern corner of the African continent.
Africa.
Yeah.
And Yemen's where? Sorry, way down
Yemen,
the fuck.
right here. So
Oh,
they're
so
on the
pretty close.
yeah. So to see this body of water here, this is the Red Sea,
And that's at the top of the Nile, right?
it's yeah, basically it's adjacent
It's
to the Nile.
adjacent.
Yeah,
It's Nile
yeah,
adjacent. That's right.
yeah,
here,
yeah.
let me show this again quickly.
Yeah,
Because this is again, so Egypt up here, and this is where they crossed, right? At that
Yeah.
Djibouti Strait there, right there.
Yeah, Bab el Mandeb Strait.
Yeah.
There it is, Bab el Mandeb Strait. That's where they cross, and that's not that far of a distance, you know. So
And then
it's
Egypt
definitely
up
possible.
here, yeah.
Yeah, and Egypt was a lot. If depending on who you ask, they say that they were a culture that came from an even greater culture, and a lot of people make the assumption that it's Atlantis. And then some people think like this Richat structure, like Atlantis was in like the Sahara or something. I don't know. It could be, but the way that people bring it up, like that guy that was on Rogan, I forgot his name. But
Jimmy
Cassetti, yeah, he I think he blocked me or like muted me on Twitter or something, because like he made a tweet that said Atlantis was in Africa.
Right,
yeah, he was like, Atlantis was in Africa, get over it. And I'm like, why open discussion like that? It was weird. And I see why he think, because of the concentric circle thing. But what Plato said, and this is not me, this is like people like Randall and other people who are familiar with Plato's work. The dimensions don't add up to the Richat structure, to what he's saying. He's imposing these concentric circles with and passing it off as Atlantis when it's not. Like the Plato was very deliberate when he described Atlantis. Like he described it to a T, like what a stadia is and all that. Like he doesn't address those types of things, and that just set me off, because he made it sound so contentious, and I don't know, I just thought it was very strange. And
yeah, that's a little bit
I think there's like evidence of those things being naturally occurring too, isn't there?
yeah, that's what Randall thinks. So I don't know. I don't have a dog in the fight, but
you should be able to question it though without getting all like blocking people just from questioning it.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
And just so while we're on the topic, here's where Randall thinks it is. So
that's the Azores Plateau.
Where that
yeah.
was, and then Strait of Gibraltar there, and then.
Yep, and there it is.
Yeah.
Dude, when you look at it like that, it does look like the Azores.
So that whole thing could have been it, right?
Absolutely.
Kind of triangle there.
Yeah.
Sorry, what were you
and
saying,
it fits
Darren?
the description. Yeah.
Well, when you look at the Azores like that, it really does look like it could have been a plateau.
Yeah. And then, I mean, how far would it be to go across here to to there, right? And
Like
then
Bimini
you're
Road.
in North, and then you're in Newfoundland.
Yeah, man. And I mean,
Newfoundland.
we haven't even talked about like the Phoenicians. Like, how did the Phoenicians get to like the Great Lakes area and start mining copper or whatever it is that they were mining? You know, like it was just very, like very interesting. There's there's a big piece that we're missing there. There's definitely, yeah, there are definitely people going in and out of America between Europe and Americas across the Pacific somehow, for sure.
So what else is new for information that's sort of changing our paradigm? Anything else?
Oh, there's a ton of there's always stuff going on, man. Are you talking more about like ancient history or more recent stuff?
Either or.
So I did talk about the 1.2 million year old the obsidian stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was also some human remains in Britain, the earliest human remains
that was
ever found in Britain.
Yeah, I watched that. That was good. Yeah.
Yeah. So like they occupied that land very quickly after the glaciers receded. So that was just a curveball to me. And because before like the date that they gave, like 11,000 something some odd years ago, I think the next earliest was about like 9,000 years, which happened to be in the around the same spot. So I think that clearing up what was going on in that part of Europe is very important as well, because that's another spot that's very contentious. They don't know what kind of people were passing through there before the Celtic people went through there.
Do you happen to have that map that shows? I think it was on your video. I saw it. The map that shows that I didn't realize this too, that the UK was half covered with ice, but there wasn't the bottom of Ireland and the southern part of the UK still free. Apparently.
Yeah, so it's on this map here. You can kind of see it here. So you can see Spain. Yeah, it's completely covered. At the last glacial maximum, it was completely covered.
Oh, it was completely covered. Well, I wonder
yeah,
if I saw that map then.
Yeah, at the glacial maximum it was, and then it slowly started.
Oh, okay. So what you're saying is when that started to recede. So before the younger Dryas, but as when the maximum started to recede, people started populating the UK.
Yes. So what happened was, when the younger Dryas happened, the glaciers were already receding.
That's the map, probably, right? Would it be the map I'm thinking of right when the younger Dryas happened?
Yeah, probably. I think that's what you're talking about. But when the younger Dryas happened, the glaciers were already receding for thousands of years, and then the younger Dryas happened, just sped all that up, and then it kind of dipped us into a brief cold period because of the fallout, and then we started resuming that warming period. It's called the Balling-Allerod period. But yeah, those people that they found in England would have been right after the younger Dryas, right after it happened. So again, that I think that speaks to the resilience of the human species, you know, just because it must have been really chaotic in the world during that time. But you know, of course, there were safe havens as well, just like with Mount Toba.
Well, there's also fucking dire beavers and short-nosed cave bears and all kinds of fucking monsters to deal with too.
And that's probably where giants came in. I mean, why couldn't humans be bigger back then?
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
Because
dire humans.
I mean, yeah, I mean they were in those burial mounds in Ohio and all over the Mississippi River Valley. They've found like 7 foot, 8 foot tall mummies, you know, in those mountains. There are old pictures from like the early 1900s of them.
Yeah,
and they're stacked in a certain way.
Everything was bigger.
Yeah, it probably was.
That's how they made all the stuff too, with the bigger people, you think?
I mean,
that's what I think, but
yeah, there were some giants in Tierra del Fuego. They some of the initial Spanish reports were that there were like 8-9 feet tall people greeting them when they got off the boat. So I don't know if that's disinformation or not, but I don't know too much about giants other than that.
Where's Tierra del Fuego again?
It's the southern tip of South America.
Oh, okay, right.
So like down here. Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, that about does it for me, guys. Like I've got some other like a little bit more, but we pretty much covered everything in a roundabout way.
No, it's good. I'm glad you're back on it. Yeah, we'll have
Yeah.
to do it again sometime.
Where
Yeah,
can
I mean-
people go ahead?
Oh yeah, where can people find me? They can go, find me at youtube.com/the Jindo. That's the best play. Just if you want to help me out, you can subscribe to me there because I am a verified YouTube creator. So I do I do get benefits from that, which is really cool. I didn't have that before I came back. I came back to that. So that was a pleasant surprise.
What does that mean?
So if you have over 2,000 subscribers or a certain amount of watch hours, YouTube can approve you as a verified like content creator.
Then, and then
basically,
monetization happens. Or?
Basically, so you can make money off like YouTube Shorts and stuff like that, and people always want to help out. So that's the best way is to just subscribe to me on YouTube. On Twitter, my Twitter handle used to be Jay Geifer, but they changed it, or I have to change it, so it's JJ Gephardt now, which is like my ancestral name from hundreds of years ago, which is JJ GEPHARDT. So yeah, that's about it.
JJEEPARDT.
JJ Gephardt. JJGEPHARDT.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, but yeah, just youtube.com/Jindo is the best. I also automatically upload to Odyssey if you guys use Odyssey. They also have live streaming there, and if I do a live stream every once in a blue moon, I'll probably do it through Odyssey. So yeah, that about does it for me.
Right on, buddy. Well, thanks for coming on again.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Jindo. Thanks for coming back on. I hope everyone checks out your YouTube channel and subscribes. And good luck on the Twitter. I mean, they gave me the boot. So I stopped trying to make fake accounts because it just seems like a waste of time at this point.
So what are you doing now then? You just going on Gab?
No, he's not doing. We got our own chats and stuff, like our own Telegram. We have our own little chat group in the Mattermost.
Instagram.
Oh, Instagram, huh? They didn't ban you from that yet?
No, they
He's
seem to be.
Banned,
I mean,
he's probably not getting
probably
very far.
shadow banned.
I saw 10 mean memes this morning from him.
It's been taken off a bit lately. I'm almost up to 300.
Oh, I remember. I just remembered something. So when are you guys having another one of those contact at the cabins?
We're doing Myths of the Stars in Bryce Canyon and Zion National Park in April 20th.
No way.
Yeah,
really?
David Matheson. We're going on hikes and checking out the Myths of the Stars. Yeah, it'll be fantastic.
Oh man, is it on your website? Is there a link on
go to contactedthecabin.com and it's on there called what's it called? Utah? Darren? No, what's it called? Hang on.
Contact at the Canyons.
Contact at the Canyons, yeah.
I would love to make that.
Yeah, dude, you should come. That'd be fantastic. You meet a whole bunch of cool people. It's amazing.
Yeah, and it's not that far from me. So yeah,
right
definitely check it out.
It's in between Bryce and Zion, so we can go to both places.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Is Darren going? Darren's going, right?
Yeah, I'll be there. Yep.
Oh, nice.
It's on 420. It's kind of
It's our 420 bash. Yeah.
You bringing the ganj, Darren? You're gonna supply everybody?
Oh, yep. Yeah,
Okay,
we'll supply the weed 100%.
There's a bowl of like a pound in a bowl just sitting there.
Perfect. All right, guys. This is really fun.
Awesome.
If I ever want to get in contact, I guess I'll just email you again the same way, right?
Yeah. You got my cell number in there too. I give you my all my contact information's in there too. So.
Oh, cool. All right, perfect. All right, guys.
Okay. Take care.
Have a good night. Yep.
All right.
Take care.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye, Darren.
And that was a chat with the Jindo. What'd you think, buddy?
Yeah, that was fun. Yeah, I liked it. What did you think?
It was good. I forgot about old Bruce Fenton. I wonder how
he's
doing these days.
Yeah. Yeah, I like this human history stuff. I just can't wrap my head around it yet, though. But it'll start to click.
Absolutely. So check out his channel, subscribe. Of course, we have our YouTube channel. You can subscribe to that. We have our new channel as well, Grimerican Media, which is a lot of more video content, short and sweet video content, short form content, kind of entry level. If you have someone that you're trying to get to listen to the show, it's the perfect kind of stuff to send them and maybe get them listening. So while you're on YouTube, subscribe and stuff. While you're on the internet, head over to grimerica.ca/support.
Hang
If you
on,
are
you forgot about the other YouTube channel that I just started.
all right. Well, all right. Go to Adult Brain.
He just skips right over the one I've been working my ass off on.
Sorry, you can tell us what that was.
We have an Adult Brain YouTube channel now with all our audiobooks. Well, not all our audiobooks, but it's got excerpts from some of the audiobooks you can find on Audible, but it's also got some full audiobooks on there too. So like H.G. Wells's World Brain and a book about recovery, the Buddhist style, recovery Dharma. So yeah, that's just to name a few.
Oh, did you put the recovery
No,
Dharma?
it's coming. Yeah, it's scheduled. Yeah.
YouTube. So we're coming out with some YouTube stuff. You can check that out. Of course, if you are getting some value from a little podcast here, head over to grimerica.ca/support. Sign up for a monthly or make a one-time donation. It is important, guys. We can't do this without you guys. We need your help. GrimericaOutlaw.ca is another way to support us. You can get over there, sign up for Plus subscription, and buy some audiobooks, come on a trip, maybe meet the Jindo, and all that great stuff. You can find links to everything we're up to at grimerica.ca. And until then, we love you guys. Thanks for listening. And we will see you next week.
Sending out good vibes. Good vibes. Good vibes. Good vibes. Good vibes.
108 breaths of deep gratitude and prayers for guidance and protection. And put on a didgeridoo and shamanic drumming track. Shivers or vibrations and stuff like that. 108 breaths of deep gratitude and prayers for guidance and protection. And put on a didgeridoo